The Back to the Future series of films contains a lot of time travel. Each of the time periods travelled to offer a unique experience with designs and effects relating to that time period. However, each time period is connected in one way or the other. Today I will be looking at two major areas of the film and discussing the differences and how they are similar at each point in the timeline. A major reoccurring set piece in the movies is the bar. We see this many times throughout the film, and in time it changed a lot. In the 1800s, the entire building is made out of very newly laid brown bricks, implying that the building has only just been built. Aside from the entrance, you can see a drink stable for horses, and what looks to be horse feces. This scene has a very dank, muddy look, implying that because the town is very new, it hasn't been fully polished yet, and is in a sort of unfinished state. They chose this look because they wanted to call back to Western films from the 60s and give a sense of nostalgia to people who grew up watching those type of movies. The green pillar and windows are found in many 1800s architecture and buildings, along with the characteristic doors, which were used in many saloons across America. Inside, you can see that the entire interior design is made from dark wood, with a chandelier in the center and a couple of gas lights on the side. Besides the counter lights, all of the other lights are off, which makes the bar look even darker and murkier in contrast to the bright, dirty look of the outside area. On the walls of the bar you can see that it is full of photos and ornaments, with it not leaving much room for the wall to breathe, maximizing space. The camera then looks up and shows a woman smoking. This gives a level of authenticity to the room, making the room seem more believable by having items and characteristics from that era. In 1955, the bar has a major part in the first movie, with it being where a lot of the key moments happen. You first see the bar when Marty discovers what year it is. Like in 1885, the bar is also coloured green, but it is now covered in 1950s curved panels. Atop from the entrance is a bright illuminating sign that has the name of the bar, which is now a cafe. The reason why they now have a lit sign is because in the 50s they started to begin massively marketing products, and the neon signs at the time were new and attracted many customers by increasing noticeability for passerbys. Inside the cafe retains the green aesthetic, but unlike the 1800s, the cafe is now a lot cleaner and minimalist with couch-like seats and curved tables. The coffee sign accurately displays the 50s aesthetic by having the font and drawing be very cartoony and simplistic, but by also having the price on the sign. This was very common when marketing products due to it appealing to kids. In the modern day 1985, most of the architecture from how the bar looked in 1955 is still there, but it looks very worn down as you can see the paint disappearing from the wall and the colour losing detail. Inside, you can see that it has been redecorated and is now a dance studio with a dance club happening inside it. This is done to add contrast in relation to the 1950s, since aerobics was very popular in the 1980s. In 2015, the place has been completely renovated and turned back into a bar. Ironically, the cafe is now themed as an 80s bar, with it trying to imitate the look of the 80s with stereotypical aesthetics. Similar to the bar in the 1800s, the wall is now loaded with items mostly related to the 80s, like a picture of an astronaut and an electric guitar. There are also faces on the wall which are meant to resemble famous people from that time period. The reason why they decided to have an 80s bar or include so many famous 80s designs is because they wanted it to feel familiar to people watching the film when it came out. Due to the last film including many ideas from the 80s, they wanted it to feel familiar. Other references to the 80s include a video of Michael Jackson on the TV and Ronald Reagan, who was animated to look like the 80s TV show character Max Headroom. The reason why they chose these two characters was due to the fact that they were very famous in the 80s, and they were both fans of the first Back to the Future film. The clock tower and main square is the next major set piece I want to talk about. In the 1800s, the clock tower was just being built and is still under construction, with orange wooden scaffolding around it. You can see that the front of the building is really the only part that has been built so far, with a hole in place for the clock to be put into. The tower uses normal orange bricks to match the rest of the building. Beside it is a singular green tree which looks like it was only just planted. This is meant to be the same tree that the wire which was sending the lightning power got stuck on. The reason why they chose this look is because they wanted to call back to other Western films which used similar colours for the buildings. The bricks are also meant to imply evolution due to the fact that the bricks are very clean and new, whereas later in the film they look very worn down, connecting the films together. The surrounding objects also play a part by having the sand be of a similar bright, saturated look, making the screen feel authentically Western. In the 1950s, the clock tower is fully built with many shops and buildings surrounding it now that the town is fully developed. The entrance to the hall is now a park with a pathway for people to walk across. At the centre lies a memorial remembering the lives lost in the Korean War, with tanks placed beside as memorabilia. The tanks look very dark and rusty, implying that they were used heavily. This is done to give the audience a sense of familiarity to the time period, due to the fact that the Second World War and the Korean War happened in recent memory to the time that took place in the film. It was also done to show how patriotism and remembrance was looked at in the 50s, with many people proud of the soldiers and look at the war in a more positive light. In the alternate 1980s, the tower has been completely renovated and converted into a hotel/casino, owned by Biff, called Biff Tannen's Pleasure Paradise. The building is very darkly lit, but also bright at the same time due to all the lights on the building. Behind it are massive power plants spewing out smoke. This adds to the dark tone by making it very hazy and hard to see because of all the smoke. This is done to make the place seem as hellish and depressing as possible, to contrast from the normal timeline. It is also a statement on climate change, with the large power plants and toxic waste disposal stations. In the regular 1985, the town hall looks slightly better than in the alternate timeline, though the clock has still been abandoned and hasn't been running for 30 years. The park is now being used as a parking lot with parking meters filling the area. This is to show a sense of economic and population growth, due to the 1950s being the start of the baby boomer generation, and with that time period also being the start of a massive economic boom for America. Other differences from the 1950s include the modern-looking Texaco petrol station with the large 4x4 Toyota, and a Bank of America building which uses a modern digital clock to display the time. They chose these stores due to them being very popular and familiar to the audience at the time, and due to the fact that they were both clear in how they contrasted from the 1950s. In 2015, the clock has been completely renovated, with the entrance now using a black stainless steel glass transparent window. Besides the hall is now a landing road for the flying cars to enter Hill Valley, and what was before a car park is now a small pond with a bridge where people can fish. Next to the pond is an underground stairway which leads to the mall. The pavement beside the pond has been replaced with stone flooring and grey gravel. They chose this look as a way of making it seem more utopian and peaceful in contrast to the past. By having a garden and pond, it adds nature, which brings calmness to the area. Next to the park is a cinema which is showing Jaws 19 in Holomax. This is meant to mock how sequel-obsessed Hollywood had become in the late 80s, and also mock how Jaws 3 was in 3D. Other stores include the Texaco station and antique stores selling 80s items. This is meant to add familiarity to the area, but also add a sense of fantasy and exaggeration, due to how the Texaco station is fully automated and fueling flying cars. In conclusion, Back to the Future uses its 3 films to connect the timelines together. The way they manage to do this is smart without it feeling forced, by subtly adding minor details that are called back to in other parts of the movies. They also use the cinematography and colour well in a way to show the different timelines and how they differ.